In the heart of Turkey, beneath a landscape already shaped like a dream, there lies a far stranger world. Above ground, the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia twist toward the sun in a silent stone forest sculpted by volcanoes and wind. But under your feet, descending hundreds of meters into the volcanic tuff, the earth has been hollowed into a ghostly labyrinth. This is not a single sanctuary, but a submerged empire of tunnels, churches, stables, and sealed doorways that vanish into the dark. Historians have mapped dozens of these subterranean cities, yet the deepest, most haunting truth is what remains unexplored. There are passages too narrow for a human body, ventilation shafts that descend into unbreathable air, and chambers deliberately buried behind tons of collapse. We stand at the edge of a known world carved by human hands and an unknown abyss that has defied every attempt at mapping. The story begins with a simple accident in 1963 when a man in the town of Derinkuyu knocked down a basement wall during a home renovation. Behind that wall, cool air rushed from a darkness that had not tasted the light of day for countless centuries. What the man discovered was not a forgotten cellar, but the topmost layer of a city capable of hiding 20,000 souls. Derinkuyu descended 18 stories, a vertical civilization carved into the rock with astonishing engineering precision. There were stone doors, shaped like millstones, rolled across corridors to seal the living from whatever hunted them. There were communal kitchens blackened by ancient cookfires, stables with feeding troughs, wineries with grape presses, and a church with a cruciform vault. As you walk those corridors today, the silence is not empty, but filled with the weight of countless whispered prayers and enduring terror. The deeper you go, the more the question shifts from, how was this built? To what were they running from? And where does it truly end? Derinkuyu was not alone. It was connected by kilometers of tunnel to another buried metropolis called Kaymakli. Kaymakli's corridors slope downward in a dizzying spiral, its rooms arranged like a honeycomb, each level linked by narrow vertical shafts. The volcanic tuff is soft enough to carve with copper tools, yet it hardens upon exposure to air, creating a self-reinforcing shell against the mountain above. This geology was a gift, but the sheer scale of the work suggests an effort that spanned generations, perhaps millennia. Archaeologists ascribe the earliest layers to the Phrygians, an Iron Age kingdom that worshipped the mother goddess Cybele in mountain sanctuaries. Later, early Christians fleeing Roman persecution expanded the labyrinth, scratching crude crosses into the walls and painting faded frescoes in hidden chapels. The standard narrative is a story of refuge, a region repeatedly swept by armies, Persian, Greek, Roman, Arab, Mongol, forcing populations into the ground. When the hooves of approaching cavalry shook the earth, entire towns could evaporate below the surface in a matter of hours. Huge rolling stone doors, perfectly balanced on pivots, would be shut from the inside, creating airtight seals against suffocation and siege. Yet, this rational explanation begins to crack the moment you venture beyond the mapped chambers into the uncharted depths. In 2014, a construction project in Nevşehir uncovered a previously unknown underground complex larger than any found before. Ground-penetrating radar suggested a sprawling warren that could surpass even Derinkuyu, a discovery so vast that officials simply ordered the digging to stop. The site was filled back in, its secrets resealed beneath modern concrete because the cost of excavation and the potential danger was too great. You must sit with that reality. Beneath a bustling modern city lies a cavernous ghost city we are choosing not to explore. Far away from the electric-lit tourist tunnels, there are vertical shafts so deep that the air turns stale and toxic at the bottom. Locals whisper of a man who descended such a shaft in the 1960s, never to return, his rope found frayed and swinging in a void. Some researchers theorize that the underground lattice does not end at the 8th or 18th level, but extends as far down as the water table. If true, that would place the deepest sanctuaries, nearly a kilometer beneath the surface, in perpetual darkness and crushing pressure. The architectural logic itself defies a purely defensive purpose, because many passages seem to lead nowhere, narrowing into claustrophobic wormholes. Were these merely escape routes, ventilation conduits, or something else? Routes to a forbidden underworld, long sealed by a catastrophic event. A darker hypothesis suggests that the deepest sections were not built by the Phrygians or the Christians at all, but by an unknown, far older culture. Could the volcanic labyrinths of Cappadocia have been a pre-Iron Age temple complex, later adopted and militarized by younger civilizations? The artifacts offered a few answers, but the soil beneath them whispered a different and more unsettling chronology. Once you entertain the possibility of a Stone Age origin, the time scale of the mystery stretches back 10,000 years. To a period when writing did not exist, where archaeology falters, local legend begins to fill the silence with stories of jinn, of a secret race of builders who burrowed to escape the sun. One Anatolian tale speaks of a lamplighter who wandered into a tunnel and emerged in a different valley. 3 days later, his hair turned white from the journey. We can dismiss this as folklore, but folklore often encodes a practical memory. The network might be continental in its connective ambition. If you study the ancient city of Özkonak, just north of Avanos, you will find a chilling anomaly in its defense design. Özkonak features a unique system of small, neatly carved holes above its long stone corridors, drilled into the ceiling at precise intervals. When invaders breached the main stone door, defenders would pour boiling oil or molten metal from the holes, turning the narrow tunnel into a furnace. This speaks to a terrifyingly high level of siege technology. And something else, a desperate paranoia, a fear of being not just conquered but annihilated. What enemy could drive an entire civilization to engineer its own suffocation traps in the bowels of the earth? The standard answer, Arab raiders, Mongol hordes, feels insufficient when you stand in a room carved with the sole purpose of burning living men alive. The labyrinth forces you to look deeper, into a period of climate collapse or an ancient plague that made fresh air a luxury and sunlight a death sentence. Geologists have confirmed that the region's soft tuff is permeated by a natural refrigeration system of cool, moving air from hidden fissures. This climate control allowed vast stores of grain and wine to survive for years, turning the cities into self-sufficient arks sealed against a hostile surface. But an ark is built with a known destination in mind. Yet these cities seem designed for an indefinite stay, their lowest levels descending into water wells that still function today. The labyrinth of Derinkuyu has a heavy stone door over a shaft that opens directly into a deep underground river, a water source that could never be poisoned. This level of foresight suggests a catastrophe so profound that the surface world was considered lost for an entire human lifetime, even several generations. Some researchers believe the tunnels are far more extensive than we can detect because they were sealed not by collapse, but with a deliberate artificial cement. A team using muon radiography in 2023 revealed anomalous voids beneath the Nevşehir region, suggesting chambers that were intentionally blocked, their entry staircases eliminated. Why would a civilization slice off its own history? To trap something inside, or to prevent something from getting out. The silence from those buried chambers is absolute, a negative space that pulls at the human psyche and demands to be filled with stories. And this is where the rational, academic model collides with a more esoteric and troubling theory. In the early 20th century, the mystic G.I. Gurdjieff traveled extensively through Cappadocia, searching for a lost brotherhood called the Sarmong. Gurdjieff claimed that deep underground, protected by shifting sands and stone, a hidden monastery preserved the pre-sand knowledge of ancient Egypt and Babylon. He never found it, but he died convinced that a river of initiation flowed under Anatolia, accessible only through unmarked cave mouths and false-bottomed pits. Dismissing Gurdjieff as a charlatan is easy, yet the region's early Christian anchorites did carve entire monastic complexes into the cones, living in a state of suspended isolation. The physical cult of the dead was present too. At the Ilara Valley, mummified bodies were laid to rest in catacombs, their bones still coated in resin. It is the temperature of a tomb, a cold so constant it feels preserved by the void itself, leaching the warmth from your skin as you descend. One theory proposes that the deepest unexplored caverns were not for the living, but vast, underground necropolises, cities of silence. This would explain the toxic air, the sealed doors, and the instinctive dread reported by cavers who have reached the final mapped terminal walls. You could press your ear to that terminal basalt wall, and you might imagine you hear something more than the hum of the earth. The human mind, however, cannot resist the pull of the sealed door, and many have paid the price for this obsession. Expeditions in the late 1960s attempted to force their way through the rubble-choked lower levels using dynamite, only to cause dangerous subsidence above. Sinkholes still open sporadically in the vineyards above, swallowing patches of grapevines into a sudden abyss, a reminder that the hollow earth is reclaiming its surface. The Turkish Ministry of Culture holds cartographic records that are classified secret maps of tunnels extending far beyond the tourist perimeter. These tunnels are not publicized because they could house archaeological treasures, or they could be structurally unsound traps, or they could link isolated villages to unknown ancestors. The knowledge sits in a vault, while the labyrinth beneath it sleeps, a sleeping giant of unexamined centuries. You begin to understand the psychological toll on the local guardians, the villagers who live with the knowledge that their bedroom floor is merely a thin crust over a catacomb. There are accounts of children who, while playing in a back garden, saw a sinkhole open and a cloud of warm, stale air exhale from the deep, carrying the scent of old stone and dust. The sky above Cappadocia is now dotted with hot air balloons. A serene tourist spectacle, but under that sunrise is a continent of darkness that has never been fully photographed. Modern technology is only now beginning to unspool the mystery without moving a single stone. Muon tomography, which scans for cosmic particles, has the potential to generate a complete three-dimensional map of the entire underground void matrix. Yet the processing power and funding needed are enormous, and the labyrinth seems to mock our high-tech hubris with its sheer silent scale. One researcher likened it to trying to map a sponge the size of a mountain using only a pinprick of light. The quest consumes individuals, not institutions. The true believers are lone archaeologists, local pensioners, and dreamers who sketch tunnel networks on napkins. They share a common haunting look in their eyes, the awareness that an answer might be just one dig away or forever lost. In the end, the unexplored sanctuaries of Cappadocia are a mirror held up to the limits of human civilization. We are a species that builds upward with steel and glass. Yet we are terrified and fascinated by those who chose to build downward into the maternal stone. There is a comfort in believing history is a solved puzzle until you stand at the edge of a Cappadocian shaft and smell the wind of a world before memory. Every culture that found these hollows added its own layer. A Phrygian altar, a Roman grain pit, a Byzantine chapel, an Ottoman dovecote. And then, 60 meters below it all, there is a chamber cut with a tool mark none of these cultures used, hinting at a phantom civilization that left no other trace. Time is the great eroder, but it is also the great concealer, packing these hollows with a heavy sediment of forgetfulness. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, but here, time has chosen to hide the deepest sanctuaries in an embrace of volcanic ash. The sand and the clock run differently underground. A single chamber can hold the silence of a century, a millennium, a glacial epoch. If those sealed doors ever opened, what would spill out would not be an army or a treasure, but a psychology, a way of seeing the dark. The abyss under Cappadocia is not empty. It is full of the unread diaries of humanity's fear, a prehistoric dread fossilized in rock. As you imagine yourself standing in the deepest mapped gallery, the lights behind you a faint glimmer, the tunnel ahead a black iris, you face a choice. The choice is not to explore or to turn back. It is whether to believe the mysteries of our past are ultimately knowable, or whether they are meant to heal. Perhaps these sanctuaries remain unexplored, not because we lack the tools, but because we lack the spiritual preparation to handle the silence we would find. So the earth keeps its secrets, cradling them in stone lungs that breathe once a century, exhaling a whisper of ancient dust. The underground sanctuaries of Cappadocia endure, and we remain above, staring at the thin crust between our world and the abyss, listening for the echo of a vanished footfall.